On Spurs' return to the Champions League on Wednesday night, the big yellow wall came tumbling down, but by Saturday, the Swans flew from Wembley unscathed. In a league where consistency is king, can Tottenham regain last season's form? This is your e-Spurs podcast.
Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Tottenham, no one can stop them.
Hi guys, welcome back to your e-Spurs podcast. Always plenty to talk about on a packed show once again. As always, we want you guys out there to get in touch and stay involved with the show. You can of course follow us via Twitter at @e_Spurs, same handle for our Instagram page, and you can follow our Facebook page at facebook.com/e-Spurs page. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel by searching e-Spurs TV. Before we kick off tonight, just a reminder that you can also download our free app via the App Store or Google Play, where you'll find articles, audio and video feeds, chat rooms and much more. So don't forget to get hold of that, guys. There's also streams for the podcast, so you can listen to the podcast direct through the free e-Spurs app. So without further ado, let's introduce tonight's panel. And first up, I'm pleased to introduce a Tottenham fan making his second appearance on the show. It's James McCarthy. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, I'm excellent, mate. Yeah, the result wasn't what we all hoped for, but I know that we've been left with plenty to talk about on the pod tonight. As
always, mate. As always, long season to go, I'm sure. And alongside James tonight, making his debut on the podcast, all the way from Texas in the States, is Austin Nardone. How you doing, Austin?
I'm doing great, Andy. Thanks for having me on the show. Long-time listener, first-time caller. I'm a big fan of the program. I'm excited to talk about a mixed bag of results this evening, and hopefully it's a cracker.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Always lots to talk about on the podcast. And one of the great things about being a Spurs supporter is that there's never a shortage of things to talk about, is there? So let's crack on, shall we? Before we start tonight, I just want to give a bit of a mention to a few of our listeners. We know that obviously there's listeners out there from all around the world, and we really do appreciate that, guys, wherever you're listening to us from on the planet. So just to give a few of you a mention, first up to Andrew Urban, at Return on Mission from Austin, Texas. His Twitter handle is at Austin Spurs. He says get involved with Austin Spurs. Also Amarilson Gordino at Amarilson. He says cheers from Brazil. We also have a podcast in Portuguese. Their podcast, you can get hold of that, guys, at tottenhambrazil.com/BR. He says congratulations for a good job. Thanks for that, Amarilson. And if you're Portuguese speaking, give that a listen. Also out there, Kevin Zarzecki, who says, I'm a listener from Suffolk, love the show and look forward to it every week. Would be great if you could also mention my two boys as well, James and Ewan. So James and Ewan, how you doing, guys? Thanks for listening, and we appreciate it as always. And last but by no means least, Austin Holmes, a long-term listener of the show we know at Come On You Spurs, Austin H. He says, I'm a listener from Apex in North Carolina. So to each and every one of you guys listening out there, thanks for listening, thanks for subscribing, and we really do appreciate it. We always want you guys to get involved in the show. That's what it's all about. So let's crack on, shall we? Start at the very beginning. Spurs v Swansea, Wembley Stadium. After the Lord Mayor's show, really, wasn't it? After that great performance against Dortmund on Wednesday, which we will come on to shortly. But we'll start with Swansea. First up, James, what did you make of the game and the performance on Saturday?
Obviously very frustrating. I think that's what most Spurs fans will tell you, that they were obviously really frustrated with the result. After the obvious highs of midweek, it was an absolutely brilliant performance against Dortmund, which I'm sure we'll get onto. But then going to a real low, because I can't believe that we just didn't break down that Swansea side. If you look at the two sides on paper, obviously Spurs, we're known for scoring goals for fun in the Premier League. Our home form has been absolutely brilliant before we moved to Wembley. And you'd think that it was a game that we were going to take 3 points from, but I suppose you have to take your hat off to Swansea. They defended really well. They really did have their backs to the wall a number of points. And everyone's kind of got their own theory on what went wrong for Spurs. But I think the number one thing is that we just couldn't find that cutting edge chance, and we couldn't make any clear cut chances. And you can put that down to the team selection. You can put it down to this so-called Wembley hoodoo. But either way, it's very frustrating for Spurs fans, because that should have been a game that we were targeting 3 points. And as I say, especially after the highs of midweek, we've come crashing back down to earth. But hopefully we can draw the positives from the performance and look forward to next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a long season. We should put it in perspective for people out there listening. It's not all doom and gloom by any stretch of the imagination, as James is saying there. It was 0-0, but, there is a long season to come. And Austin, I mean, it certainly wasn't for lack of trying, was it?
No, we were... What was it, like 80% possession to the 20? Or I'm sure that's not exactly what it was, but it certainly almost seemed like 90% possession to 10% possession, because they had absolutely no clear-cut chances. Hugo was a pedestrian in this match, so probably for the best as well. But at the same time, it's one of those things where you just felt like the goal was coming, and I think that there was a fair shout for a penalty, not once but twice in this match. There was a handball, and I believe it was the same player on Swansea who committed the foul. So one of those things where, for me, I felt a little hard done by the result. I felt like there was plenty of opportunity for us to, if not get one, and it was really surprising, too, that Mike Dean, obviously, everybody thinks he's a yid. So it's one of those things where I think that almost is a negative for us, for him to referee our matches, because he, I think, also hears the banter, I'm sure, not only in his professional career, but also probably his friends, family members, things along those lines, probably all give him stick for that. So it's one of those things where I feel like maybe he feels when he referees for games for us, he needs to be overly unbiased, and then he misses an opportunity, a clear-cut opportunity to call a penalty whenever there was clearly one. So for me, very, very disappointed with the 0-0 result. I really wish that I feel like, for a team like Spurs, who has aspirations of fighting for a title, year in and year out, it feels like these are the games that kind of you look back on and you say, well, that 2 points that we dropped could be crucial. And, what did we have, like 8 draws last year? So we're already on 2 this year. It's a bit of a concern, especially after doing so well midweek against, I think, questionably one of the better young European sides in football right now, in Borussia Dortmund. So, and I know we'll come on to that, but yeah, those are my thoughts. I'm just very disappointed.
Yeah, and I think there are many Spurs fans out there feeling that disappointment also from Saturday. I think, having come after the Dortmund game, it makes it feel that much harder to take, doesn't it? Seeing that sort of swashbuckling performance against Dortmund on Wednesday. And James, was you surprised? A lot of the talk on social media after the game was about the change in the team and the formation. We will speak about Pochettino in the listeners' questions later on, but was you surprised to see Pochettino change the personnel and formation from that on Wednesday, or was it expected for you?
I'm not one to criticise Pochettino because of the amazing things that he's done to our football club. He's probably the best thing that's happened to this football club for a good number of years, and he's taken us in an absolutely incredible direction. But for one of the first times in his kind of reign, I am really disappointed with how Pochettino kind of approached this game. I completely understand that players need rotating, players need swapping in and out to reduce injuries, to reduce fatigue. But I think this is one game that we really should target to play our best team, with obviously the game in midweek being much less important. We've got a cup game in midweek, and therefore surely that should be a game that we're targeting to rest players like Ben Davies, who needed a rest. And I think this is a game that we should have been playing our best team. I think it's fairly clear by now that Serge Aurier is the best right wing back at Tottenham. Kieran Trippier obviously is a fantastic right back. We know that he created as many chances as Kyle Walker last season, but he is much more of a right back to me, and so he doesn't really fit the system that we try to play in the Premier League, as well as someone like Serge Aurier. And when Aurier came on, it was very clear to see that he fit the system a lot better, and he should have been on from the start. And that's what's really disappointed with me, is that if these players were on the pitch, if these players were playing in all the preferred positions, then this would have been probably an easier game. We wouldn't have had to struggle the way we struggled. In terms of going forward, obviously, we never really created the clear-cut chances that we needed to create. I thought Heung-min Son was absolutely brilliant, and he kind of justified his selection in the team, because a lot of people were calling for him to be dropped back to the bench to revert to our former formation. But I think the main thing for me is that with that cup game in midweek, we really should have targeted as that the game where we're gonna bring out these players and give them their breather. But this game was one that we needed to play our best 11. We should have picked up the 3 points, and if we play the best 11 from the start, then maybe we can substitute these players towards the end of the game to give them a bit of a breather with the game already won. But as it wasn't to be. I'm not going to dwell on criticising Pochettino too much, because, as I say, in my eyes, he is the father that I wish I never had, But yeah, I, on this occasion, he kind of isn't immune to criticism, and I will criticise him on this occasion.
Yeah, and of course it's got to be said, in fairness to Pochettino, he's the same guy that put the team out on Wednesday. So, it's give and take, and we all make mistakes, don't we? And I think, as I say, repeating myself, coming after Wednesday makes it that little bit tougher and stand out even more. Austin, just to go over a few of the stats from Saturday, Tottenham recorded 75% possession, their highest in a single Premier League match since Opta began recording stats in 2003. So it just goes to show possession means absolutely nothing, doesn't it, if you can't put the ball in the back of the net?
Yeah, 75% of the possession is wonderful. But like you say, if you can't put the ball in the net, then it's kind of useless. You would think that even with the lineup, just going back to what you were saying about Pochettino's selection, that with the lineup that was selected, we should have had enough clear-cut chances to at least score a single goal. It's funny because another stat, and I just kind of sometimes hate these stats that pop up on Bleacher Report or that pop up, on Twitter or whatever. The stat was we had, I believe, in 30 consecutive home games, we had scored at least one goal. And as soon as I saw that stat, my stomach just turned, because
it's a 0-0 draw after that.
Dude, the Spursiness is just, you can't escape it. I wish that, with all that I have, that we could get past that kind of, basically the cards are stacked against you. What's going to happen? Well, if it's Spurs, you're probably going to crash and burn miserably. It's just, that's the thing that I think, even though we have completely changed the mindset of the club by having Pochettino in the team, and by having, a lot of winners especially come to the club in this last transfer market, you tend to think that, we're still kind of shaking off that frustration and that Spursiness, if you will. But it just goes to show you that in the Premier League, there's no such thing as a for sure win. You can't count your chickens before they hatch. You gotta be realistic about any team that's lower in the table is probably going to set up the same way. That's what the pundits on ABC were saying, and I think they're spot on. I think if you're going to come to Wembley, and this could probably be for any team, it's probably just to sit back, bide your time, and hopefully hit Tottenham on the break. I think our defense looks amazing. The back three was another hit, not only for Borussia Dortmund, but also for Swansea. Obviously, we stymied almost all of their chances. They really had almost nothing going forward. But the only issue with that is it just seems to be that regardless of all of the possession, regardless of the right way being set up, I agree with what James was saying about the team selection, where Serge Aurier, as soon as he comes onto the pitch, it's a very obvious change that maybe needed to happen either sooner than it did, or possibly he should have started over the likes of, was it Heung-min Son that was at the left wing back position? I'm not sure. I know Davies did not start that game, so that was one of those kind of questionable decisions where, even though I think Son did very admirably, and even early in that second half really had a few opportunities where he looked really scary, it just didn't seem like we could, the ball was kind of moving really slowly, it seemed. It just didn't seem like we had enough zip and enough pass and enough vision to really kind of get anything going in that final third. So, yeah, very, very frustrating. And I continue to see this, unfortunately, happening against sides like a Swansea. The lower level clubs are definitely going to do the same thing. They're going to try and come into Wembley and to steal a point by basically sitting 12 behind the ball. Or 11.
11 behind the ball, absolutely. And I mean, after the game, Pochettino said, I'm happy with the performance, although it's another game we drew here at Wembley, and that is no good. I like to talk about my team. We created a lot of chances to score, and they did, in fairness. I mean, as I say, it wasn't for lack of trying. Shots from every angle just couldn't get through. But there was, James, it was interesting because there was that almost fatigue to the Spurs play, wasn't there? It looked as if they were tired out there. It looked as if the Dortmund game had maybe they were on a bit of a downer after the Dortmund game almost.
Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying there. You're right in saying that we didn't move the ball as quickly as we need to move if we're going to play this system. And that is the kind of thing for me, is that I wanted to get my shout on the kind of Pochettino system. And that is, look, we are going to play this three at the back because we do have an incredible array of centre defenders. Those three at the back are absolutely brilliant. And Pochettino therefore wants to play this system with wing backs. For me though, I think we should have to sacrifice the system if it means we haven't got the personnel to fit that system. So for me, Pochettino should have looked at the system before the game and said, look, we haven't got those wing backs. We don't have those players. And so therefore we are going to have to play a different system. For me, the system that he should have played would have been sacrificing Jan Vertonghen and playing him at left back. I know that's something that we never used to like seeing at Tottenham. Jan himself was fairly miserable when he had to play there. But on this one occasion, I think it would have worked a lot better, especially playing against someone like Swansea, who weren't going to offer too much in attack anyway. So for me, I just don't think we should be shoehorning footballers into this system if they're not going to fit the system. We need to either buy players to fit the system, or if those players aren't there, then we just simply need to play a different system. There's no point playing these wing backs if they're not going to be the kind of flying wing backs, the Danny Rose and the Kyle Walker that we had last season. For me, in centre midfield, I think the biggest problem was, yeah, you're right, we didn't move the ball fast enough, and the obvious answer to me for that would have been Harry Winks. He's one player that is just so fast at getting the ball in and out of his feet immediately. I saw people calling for Moussa Dembele, and for me, that's the complete opposite. He's someone who's a lot more calm and collected on the ball, and he's not one to rush. But for me, Harry Winks has got that energy, and he should have been the player that was introduced to kind of give Spurs a bit more zip and a bit more impetus on the attack. Also,
I think, mate, it's all about football. For me, is a huge amount of it is about consistency, isn't it? When you've got a winning team and you've got players who are in form and just come off the back of a fantastic win against Dortmund, they're going to want to go again the next day, aren't they? Let alone 2 days ahead. So, I mean, I know Pochettino wants to rotate, and he's not the only one, in fairness to him. There's many other managers out there that rotate the squad. But surely when you're just off the back of a win like that, you keep the team as close as possible to that winning team. I mean, we often argue, don't we, about defence. The most important thing in any defence is consistency, keeping the defence together so they get to know each other, get to know how each other play. And surely that works for other positions, does it not?
Yeah, of course, and you're completely right in saying that. And with the game in midweek being a so-called easier game, or maybe a game that we worry less about, that should be one that we should be targeting to rest these players, not in a Premier League clash that is really a vital 3 points, especially at this stage in the season when we've got that, as you say, that momentum. We really should have kept that momentum going. It's something that I'm sure Pochettino will probably be kicking himself for, but really, I just think he should have had that foresight to think, look, this game in midweek is a lot easier. We can change our entire 11 if we have to. So let's give these guys one last run out, get the 3 points, and then they can have their breather afterwards. Yeah, absolutely. And again, we should point out, in fairness to Pochettino, that he was the manager that put the team out on Wednesday. So swings and roundabouts, fantastic on Wednesday. Bit of a hiccup on Saturday, but no more than that. And it's a long road to go, isn't it? Long season to go. Listen, guys, we're going to take a very short break. We're going to be back after the break with lots of your questions. You guys are great every week at getting your questions into us. We'll have your questions. We'll have a preview of the Barnsley game. All that's just to come in just a moment.
Welcome back to the e-Spurs podcast. Just before we crack on with your questions, guys, I just want to go over a subject that's been trending on social media, you could say, this week. The subject of Dele Alli, and if I don't mention Dele Alli, I know we'll get a few questions as to why we haven't mentioned him on the podcast this week. And just in fairness to the guy, I just want to sort of balance things up and put across some points of view from both sides of the social media debate this week that we've had on our social media at @e_Spurs. So for those who have been disappointed with the form of Dele Alli lately, Pete J. Coleman at Pete J. Coleman 007 says he needs to be rested and get his mind refocused. He's clearly had his head turned with ideas of being elsewhere. Ian Greenrod at Grimmers07 says he needs to spend more time concentrating on his game than a new agent. Of course, we know about the recent news about him parting company with his current agent, looking for a new agent, possibly Mina Raiola and others. Joe Blinko at JB Coys 1882 says he hasn't brought anything into the side this year. He has an attitude and Poch needs to sort him out. So those are the concerns about Dele Alli on social media. But quite rightly, there are those that are very, very happy with the lad we bought from Milton Keynes a couple of years ago now. At Hakuden Hobbit at Ryu 1303 says there's an overreaction. He was fouled repetitively tonight and played decently. It wasn't the Dortmund style, but if Ali left tomorrow, fans would implode. AJS at Aaron Selfway says no one is at their best 100% of the time. Why should we expect him to be? He's still a match-winning player. He'll be back. And it's got to be said, this is a player we're talking about who's won the Young Player of the Year award 2 seasons in a row. In the England side, scored a blinding goal on his debut, didn't he? James, is there an overreaction about Dele Alli in the last few weeks?
Yeah, completely. But for me, it's all brought on by himself. The overreaction can sort of be taken as a compliment for Dele Alli because people expect so much from him that when he doesn't produce, he gets this kind of backlash. He's literally shot himself in the foot with his amazing performances in the last couple of seasons because people expect him to be pulling it out every single week and pulling out the bag every week. And it was kind of the same with Harry Kane. You know, he's just gone a whole month without scoring. And so you saw straight away the media were right on his back saying, is he not good enough for Tottenham, etc. And when really it's clear that he is, but it's just out of form. You're right in what the listeners have said in that, you know, not everyone is at their best sometimes. As I've listened to podcasts that I've done back and I thought I am chatting some absolute rubbish here. But, you know, I haven't been sacked straight away. People have given me another chance. But, you know, Dele Alli, we know he is, as you rightly say, an absolute match winner. And if Dele Alli left Tottenham tomorrow and went to any other side in the world, I'd be absolutely gutted because he's clearly someone that we really, really need to nurture. He's a talent that needs nurturing. And he isn't the finished article. It's easy to forget that Dele Alli is only, 21 years old. He is far from being the finished article. He is by far and away ahead of any other player at his age who played similarly to him. You know, I've seen an awful lot of comparisons to Frank Lampard this week where, you know, he wasn't the player that he ended up being when he was 21 years old, and Dele Alli isn't either. He's going to only improve, and it's up to us as Spurs fans to get behind him rather than doing what some have done and jumping straight on his back. But for me, you can kind of take it as a backhanded compliment that people are expecting him to pull out these performances every week.
Yeah, and I mean, Austin, do you think I remember Ryan Giggs when he came through at Manchester United. Alex Ferguson really protected him from everything, protected him from the media, from newspapers, doing interviews. It just seems to me in the last few months or so, Dele Alli seems to be on the front page of every single magazine over here. I don't know if you guys get that over there, but front page of every magazine, he's on TV commercials over here. He's got a huge amount of exposure for someone so young. Do you think it's all happened a little bit too quickly for Dele Alli, maybe?
I mean, I don't know if that's the case. I really don't think it could ever happen too fast. I mean, there are professional footballers who start playing, you know, at the top level at 17, 18, 19 years old. So I think really this age is perfect. I just think that like you say, and like James was saying, you just got to give the guy some time because it's not like, I mean, he's already scored more goals at his age than most of the other great names that we're mentioning, like a Ryan Giggs or a Frank Lampard, you know? So it's one of those things where for me, he's especially because he's English, he's always going to kind of be compared to these other great, like, English midfield, kind of dynamo type players that just really have these incredible kind of moments in time in their career where they either score a boatload of goals for their club, or they score an amazing goal for their country, or whatever may have you. But the thing is, with Dele, he is so young. So, and that's what we constantly, I think, forget. When you see him flipping off, teammates or opposing team members or whoever who is flipping off in that game, we all kind of look at that and frown at that because we're like, well, why is he doing that type of thing when he knows he has so much to lose? Well, in reality, he has almost nothing to lose. I mean, the sky's the limit for Dele Alli. So it's not like he's going to be losing sleep over, I can guarantee you he's going to lose sleep over missing the first 3 games of the Champions League campaign, especially since the 3rd game of that series is in the Bernabeu. And if he does, as a lot of people think, have his head turned possibly by bigger clubs, bigger aspirations, and things along those lines, you got to think that playing in a Bernabeu is probably, right at the top in terms of list of priorities as to what you would like to achieve in your early career. So I guarantee you he is maybe a little bit disappointed in his own actions and kind of his own worst enemy at times, because his attitude, which is what we love about him, and also what we all feel like if you were to even stymie that in any way, you might actually be stymieing the best part or the biggest part of what makes him so great. So it's a strange case with Dele, because there are times where he goes absolutely missing, like totally anonymous in a match. I think in the Swansea match, a lot of people were getting frustrated because it seemed like he was completely inept at doing almost anything. And I think that really kind of comes down to, and you have to give a little bit of credit to Swansea as to how much space they were allowing him to have. Not only that, but when you get under Dele's skin a little bit and you tackle him, I mean, there was, I think in the Swansea game, I forget the guy's name, but one of their center backs steps on the back of Ali's heel and actually tears his Adidas shoe a little bit. So, you got to think that probably does get in your head just a little bit. Not so much that he's afraid of the contact or that he's afraid of, performing in a big game situation or just performing past, obviously, the annoyances that they're going to constantly try and throw at you. But I think that for him, he has to really dig deep, especially because he is so young, and realize that I am a target, not only for media, not only for opposing defenses, but also for my own fans. I'm a target. I'm going to constantly be under the watchful eye because I have achieved so much at such a young age. Like James was saying, I think that we really just have to give the young man some time, and I do feel like he has a big part to play as long as he stays healthy. I'm going to touch a bit of wood when I say this. As long as he stays healthy this season, I tend to think that he's going to have a very big part to play in this season, the same as the previous 2 seasons. I just think that at times when he goes missing, it is very frustrating because we all know what kind of quality he has in his locker.
Yeah, it's some great points you both make there, and it's clear the guy has bundles of talent, and then he's on course, if he stays at Spurs for a few years, to become one of our best, and huge amount of talent there. Let's just hope he sticks around and fulfills it at Spurs, because there are going to be those vultures out there trying to pounce, and there would be absolute uproar if he left. So let's just hope that he sticks around and continues his growth at Spurs. Fantastic points, lads. We've got to move on because time's getting away with us, but let's move on to the questions, which you guys have been fantastic in again this week in sending them in to us. Don't forget, if you've got a question for the panel on any e-Spurs podcast, get them in to us at e_Spurs on Twitter, e-Spurs page on the Facebook, or you can use our new app. Go to the chat section and there's a podcast question section there. So let's crack on, shall we? And let's first of all start off with Wembley, the subject of Wembley. And let's go to James, who was having an interesting conversation with James before the podcast about Wembley. James, this question we've got a couple on this one, so I'm going to put them together. The first one from Daniel at Daniel Hull 1966, who says, is there a genuine reason to fear moving to the new stadium if it retains the same pitch size and atmosphere as Wembley. And Devrakan Pai at Ali A. Dyer says, why is the atmosphere so dead at Wembley? So sort of double-edged question there. Is there a fear moving to the new stadium? I'm guessing he means another big stadium. And Devrakan Pai says, why is the atmosphere so dead at Wembley? Over to you.
Well, starting with the new stadium, for me, that's kind of something that we shouldn't really be worrying about too much, because hopefully the designers of the new stadium and whoever is kind of putting their heads together about the new stadium is looking at the issues that we've got with Wembley right now and thinking how can we kind of eradicate those points. And hopefully, and you know what Spurs have released so far in terms of detail for what the new stadium is going to be like. They have kind of thought about things, and they've thought about what made White Hart Lane so special and what is not making Wembley so special right now. Things like making the crowd really close to the pitch, getting that atmosphere. I'm really glad that they've kept the kind of like the four ends, because obviously Spurs is so famous for having, you know, the Park Lane, the Shelf side, and I didn't want that kind of soulless circle like the Emirates and like Wembley. And then, you know, I'd like to think that these are the things that are being thought about and really are going to be implemented. We're going to have our own pitch dimensions, the kind of pitch that we want to play on, rather than this, you know, the big pitch that's being talked about at Wembley. And you know, and hopefully it's all been thought about, and so that we'll get the best out of the team as well as the best out of the fans and the best atmosphere, because the atmosphere at White Hart Lane was absolutely incredible. You know, it's something that if you've been there as a Spurs fan, you'll never forget it, because it is so incredible. Whereas at Wembley it is a little bit stifled. And going on to Wembley, I think the reasons why the atmosphere isn't so great is because of you know, just the type of supporters that are coming. It's something that I don't think is too much of a concern. The fact that Tottenham are such a global superpower now and have such worldwide fans, we see fans questions coming from all over the world on this very podcast. And so the fact that Spurs have got so many fans from all over the world, we've got one on with us right now. Austin's talking to us from America, and so I don't think it's a bad thing. But when these people come across as so-called tourists to a big game like at Wembley Stadium, they haven't kind of got the same feel that old school football fans would give. They don't you know, they maybe don't stand up and sing as much. They don't, you know, make themselves heard, and the atmosphere isn't quite there. That coupled with obviously it is so much bigger than the White Hart Lane. It's immediately visible. As soon as you step out there, you can tell straight away this is a very, very big place. And it is really just hard to generate an atmosphere. And then, you know, once things start going badly, that atmosphere dies, and it's very difficult for groups of supporters to get that going, because what one group of supporters might be singing at one end of the pitch, the other end of the pitch, if you're in the top tier, there's no way you're ever going to hear that. And so it is very, you know, it's hard to get that atmosphere going. But for me, I don't think it's too much of an issue. Spurs are a global side now, and we can expect to see these tourists coming from all over the world, because we are a spectacle to behold, and people do want to come and see them.
Yeah, it's a great shout. Some good points you make there. And also think maybe on that one, just to answer the questions there, that sometimes I think it's a case of the team having to lift the crowd. And we saw on Wednesday night, didn't we? There was, I mean, it's just fantastic flowing football, and the crowd noise around me where I was sitting, I'm sure it was the same for you guys and the guys who were there at Wembley. It was amazing to be there, even though the stadium wasn't full. There was a buzz in the stadium, as you expect on a Champions League night, but I think the football helped, I really do, and that lifts the crowd. So sometimes I think, as much as we as fans have got to lift the team, I think it works both ways as well. So I definitely think there's that to it, but some great points you make there, James. Let's move on to the next question of the night, which of course goes to Austin. Austin, this is about the style of football Spurs play, and we've covered it slightly, haven't we? Calvin AJ says, why can I as a supporter see that our offence is way too slow to play on the biggest pitch and our coaching staff don't see it? And again, to combine that with another question, because they're both on the similar theme, Minty Bloke says, how do you solve the problem of teams sitting back and playing for a draw? So, you know, sort of relating to the Swansea game, but Spurs do tend to have this thing, because teams they often fear Spurs, and it's often a sign of respect, isn't it, that they come to White Hart Lane or Wembley now, and they do park the bus. So many teams have done it. Last season we saw an improvement getting through, but again on Saturday we seem to struggle. So the questions for this one are: is our play too slow, and why do we struggle to break teams down when they park the bus?
Well, that's the $1 million question. I mean, I'm sure if I could answer it so easily, then I would probably have Pochettino's job. But the reality is, Spurs are now a side that teams do fear, especially teams that are going to be, really coming and only playing for a point on the road. I mean, even the likes of Chelsea pretty much did the same thing. I mean, I know Chelsea was without Hazard when we played them, and they were also without, their first choice center back. But it's one of those things for me where I think that even though it is extremely boring to watch, both from the outside perspective, someone who's watching on TV as well as someone who's in the stadium, I can imagine that it's very, very tedious to try and watch a game for 90 minutes where there's maybe one clear-cut chance. It's just, you would think that with the quality that we have in the side, and I know we were talking about this earlier, that we would have enough of those playmakers to possibly pick a pass. And it seemed like we were really on the cusp of doing just that against Swansea. But I don't know. I think I guess the obvious answer would be, okay, well, why don't we let the other team have maybe, let's say, 40% of the possession or even 35% of the possession. So then that way we can kind of sit back a bit and let them come on to us. We saw what happened on Wednesday when that happened. We actually, we had a lot less possession and really, frankly, played a lot less football against the likes of a Dortmund, and yet we beat them 3-1. Obviously, there was a goal that was called offsides that shouldn't have been, but still, we were the more clinical of the two sides playing in the same stadium. So it's one of those things where, I tend to think that the best thing or the best option moving forward would kind of like what James was saying earlier, maybe just switch up the system, possibly see about, maybe switching around some personnel. I think Winks in the center midfield might have been a better option than the likes of a Sissoko. So I do want to see different lineups, and I sometimes would like to see a difference in the way that we play. I think that is probably the answer to the question.
Brilliant stuff. So Calvin and Minty Bloke, hope that answers your question. Just to finish up on the questions for tonight, James, this one's from O. Car Leong at OKL1970, and they asked, already 5 points behind the leader, are we playing catch-up already? And how far do you think we can go in the Champions League?
For me, I think it's not something to panic about so far. I stress so far because if things carry on the way they are, it is going to be something to panic at, and we are going to fall behind. Right now, we've got plenty of time to see where we are as a team. We've got plenty of time to reassess the situation and kind of look at games where we can go and get the 3 points. Look, right now, Newcastle are sat in the top 4 in the Premier League. We aren't going to see them there towards the end of the season. We're just not. And so, do we really think that Newcastle fans are getting carried away? Are they saying that they're preparing for the Champions League next season? No, they're not. So why are we preparing for us being outside of the top 4? It's completely different. And so, for me, it's nothing to panic about. We know Spurs as a fan base is very quick to panic about things like this. It's known as a meltdown, I believe, and so it can be expected when we don't beat teams like Swansea. There always going to be one of these meltdowns. But for us, no, I'm not panicking at the moment. We've got plenty of time to pick up the points, and I'm very sure that we will. In terms of the Champions League, I think so far we've been playing some absolutely wonderful football in European competition. We watched that game against Borussia Dortmund. It's clear to see that our system that we play probably favours playing against European teams. These European teams aren't going to sit back and defend the way Swansea did. They're going to come and attack us, and that probably suits our style a lot more. The way Dortmund came out of the blocks and attacked us, we really picked them off. And if we can do that against other teams in Europe, then there's no reason why we can't get out of our group to start with, because that has to be our aim. we were in the group of death, so to speak, and so getting out of that group really has to be our main target. But there's no reason why we can't go as far as any other English teams in Europe. And for me, I think the quarterfinals could be something that we're aiming at. We got there a couple of years ago with a team that for me isn't as good as the one we've got now. So why can't we, get as far as that team did, especially playing against opposition that suits our playing style?
Yeah, and I think you're right there when you say the European type of football I think does suit Spurs more. And I read the following day after that Dortmund game actually, that the German media were completely surprised by how Spurs had played and absolutely walked over Dortmund in that game. So I think that probably woke a few people up in Europe that hadn't expected that. I think this is a different Spurs to the Spurs we saw last season. I think they have learnt to a certain degree from that last season. As long as we get those tactics right, I can certainly see, as James said there, us going to the quarterfinals. Depending on the draw, then who knows? It's a lottery, isn't it? Pretty much from there. You could argue that we're getting a lot of the hard games out of the way early in Dortmund and Madrid, and that being a good thing. So certainly there to enjoy, isn't it? And in terms of the league, I think we also said last season and towards the start of this season that anywhere from fourth up, I think this season is a good season, isn't it? Because of the Wembley factor and you get teams coming to Wembley, and it's the arguably the most famous football stadium in the world. They're turning up to play a league game at. So that makes it, a lot harder for Spurs in the league. So we'll see. But I think it's certainly things are moving in the right direction, aren't they, in general? So we will see. But cheers, guys, for your questions this week, as always. And please keep them coming in at e_Spurs on the Twitter and e-Spurs page on the Facebook. Also use the e-Spurs app. Get involved on that. It's available right now. Okay, so let's move on to the last part of tonight's show, which is, of course, as always, the preview for the next game, which is an absolute barnstormer, an absolute thriller to come against Barnsley at Wembley Stadium. A good opportunity, I would think, having said that, to see some of the kids at Spurs play. We know Pochettino likes to do that, so a great opportunity. What an opportunity for them to play on the Wembley pitch. Austin, what do you expect from this one on Tuesday night?
Play the kids. Play the kids. I'm just thinking very young lineup, probably going to be Kyle Walker-Peters, hopefully Marcus Edwards. I want to see all the young and bright talent in this team, and possibly the likes of an Nkudu as well. I think he had good showings in cup runs last year as well. So I want to see pace. I want to see maybe a change in system. I want to see some goals, because it is at Wembley. This is 3 games in a row here, and I want to see another win. That's pretty much it for me. I want to see the youth get a chance. I want Harry Kane to be as far away from the starting lineup as possible, because I feel like he is absolutely going to be the most important player to our team this season, almost as much as every season, and we cannot really afford an injury with the likes of a Llorente being his backup. I almost feel like Llorente might start the game, which would be kind of cool as well, because I think that would almost usher a new lineup with him in the starting lineup. So I'd like to see a little bit of pace surrounding the likes of a Llorente. I think that would probably be the best bet moving forward. And then obviously I'm kind of almost looking at this game with one eye on the game and then the other eye on the future for the next Premier League game or for the next Champions League game, because for me, I don't know how serious Pochettino is going to take the cups this year. Last year we obviously made a very, very deep run in the FA Cup, made it all the way to the semifinals. So yeah, I mean, obviously don't want to ever see the team lose, but I'm not too concerned with the likes of a Barnsley. I'd like to see the team win and win convincingly, and possibly even, get some of that hoodoo off of our back, because I feel like it's still kind of in the air there for us, and I'd really like to see us just kind of get over that hump.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got to say, I love the cup competitions. I remember last season, the Liverpool game up at Anfield. Got a tough draw in that one, didn't we? But it was absolutely gutted when we went out. I love the cups. Got to be said, I love the cup competitions. That's what Tottenham have built a lot of their history on the cup competitions. And I know, I think most of us are realistic enough now to know that the cup competitions, the domestic cup competitions, I should say, come way down the pecking order now for most big teams. But it's so nice, isn't it, to see your team lift a bit of silverware at the end of the season. James, where does this one fall in the priority order for you, and what sort of team would you expect to see on Tuesday night?
I have to agree with Austin, really. For me, it's not really a priority, but I'm from the same vein of thought as you, Andy. I really do love seeing Spurs going on a cup run. There's nothing better than going to Wembley when you've actually earned going to Wembley rather than just agreed to play there for a year. But for me, we have to look at our priorities. We've got quite a small squad in terms of squad size. And so this is a game that we should be looking to rest key players and also give players that, as you say, need a run out. They give them a run out too. I think Nkudo is a really great shout. He seems fit and ready to go, and he's done bits and pieces on his cameos, and so a go from the start might do him good. In terms of youth, I'd love to see Harry Winks go from the start, because he's one player that we should really be looking to get involved back in the first team fray, as well as Kyle Walker-Peters. He's clearly a talent. He's been in and around the England youth setup for a very long time and really successful with the youth teams in the summer, and I think he should be rewarded for that. And so, much the same as Austin, I really want to see a mixed up side. Hopefully Fernando Llorente can get a go from the start and grab that first goal, because that first goal will obviously give him confidence. Once you get the first one, hopefully the rest will come. And really, I think it's something that Pochettino has been good at in the past is not changing the entire 11, but kind of mixing it up and giving first teamers a go to get their confidence up. If Dele Alli needs a goal to bring up his confidence, then maybe throw him on for 20 minutes at the end and see how things go there. But then again, we don't want to risk getting an injury, especially an injury to someone like Harry Kane, as you say. It might kind of derail our season before it's even got started. So hopefully it's kind of a mixed side with a bit of youth, a few players that need to prove themselves, and some players that might need their confidence boosting. But you rightly say I'm not too afraid of Barnsley. They're probably going to do what Swansea did at the weekend and come and park the bus. But they'll probably play above themselves because of the venue that they're in. They're playing at Wembley, and so their players are probably looking at each other thinking we're probably never going to be here again. So they're going to play out of their skins, and so it'll probably be a tougher game than we expect. But hopefully Spurs come through it unscathed and without any injuries, which is probably the first and foremost thing.
Absolutely, and I think the club have also got to be commended on the ticket prices for Tuesday night. I think there's something like £10 and £5, aren't there? So hopefully should be a decent crowd turnout for the lads on Tuesday night that are playing. Barnsley currently 20th in the Championship, having won only 2 games this season. So on paper, there shouldn't even really be much of a competition, arguably. Having said that, it is of course a cup. It's Wembley. The head-to-head between the two, Spurs 17, Barnsley 10, 6 drawn. So Spurs, of course, way out on that one. The most recent encounter, 1999, which was the game which saw the famous David Ginola goal, of course, doing a bit of a Ricky Villiers, wasn't he, around the Barnsley team. But yeah, it should be a cracking game. If you're going along to that on Tuesday night, enjoy it. Before we finish, as always, let's get the predictions of the two lads on the show tonight. Austin, for the first time ever, your predictions, please.
Well, my predictions, I'm going to say, obviously want to be positive, as always on any podcast, and anytime I talk about Spurs, I feel like what you put out in the universe comes back. So I think for Spurs, I'd like to see 3-0. I feel like I was talking to you about the Swansea game and felt like we were pretty close to being a hat trick, if you will, in terms of games with 3 goals or more in a row. And I was incorrect for that about Swansea. So I'm going to stick with 3-0. I think that is very, very likely, especially given the likes of a Barnsley against our squad. So, yeah, I'm going to go 3-0.
Lovely 3-0. What a great night in the League Cup that would be. And James, your predictions, please.
I'm going to go positive as well. I'm not quite as spiritual as Austin, so I'm not going to give you all that. But I am going to say I'm going to go with a 3-1. I think Barnsley might nick one, and give us a bit of a worry. But yeah, I think Spurs will pull it back, and 3-1 is my prediction.
A lovely 3-1. So there you go. There's the predictions of the e-Spurs lads, 3-1 and 3-0. Let's hope the boys go out there and do it on Tuesday night and get a good cup run behind them to start the season. Listen, guys, fantastic show tonight. Really enjoyed that. Been a pleasure having you on. James, thanks as always.
It's an absolute pleasure. I love being on the Spurs podcast, and hopefully much more to come.
Brilliant stuff. As always, mate, we're always welcome on the podcast. And Austin, your debut, great debut, and thanks for joining us tonight, mate.
Thanks, brother. I hope to be back soon, and yeah, come on, you Spurs.
No problem at all, and same to you, mate. Always welcome on the podcast. Listen, guys, it has been a pleasure. Don't forget to keep getting involved with the podcast. You're what it's all about. So carry on the discussion at @e_Spurs on the Twitter. If you want to talk to the two lads who've been on the podcast tonight, their Twitter handles will be advertised via the e-Spurs Twitter when the show goes out. So get involved in the discussion with us and with them. We'll be back next week to review the Barnsley game and, of course, that massive London derby at the London Stadium against West Ham. So keep in touch with all things e-Spurs. From Austin, from James and myself, have a great week, guys, and as always, come on you Spurs.